Okay, peeps, welcome back. So today we're going to be talking about Bitcoin, the Bitcoin miners, all of the Bitcoin indicators that we currently have, our options plays, and what our plans are going forward for crypto. So with that being said, let's get it. So we're going to try to fly through some of these real quick. First thing that we're going to go over is the Bitcoin halving. So we have 16 days roughly until the halving. Halving is on April 20th. As you guys know, we've been going over this ad nauseum on this channel. The bull run generally starts the end of the year of the halving year. We're in the halving year right now, so that would indicate roughly about November, December of this year. So we are getting ready for the halving. We are still accumulating crypto even at this point. So very critical month this month in terms of crypto and Bitcoin. So crypto 5-year search term, as you guys can see, it's kind of trending down. This generally does happen when the market starts to sell off. Retail traders who are just looking for a quick buck, i.e., I like to refer to them as gamblers because they don't really have a game plan. They just kind of go and buy whatever, like, ooh, that coin's up 1,000%. Let me go buy that, and then they freak out and panic sell when it dumps. That's kind of what this indicator is indicative of. So in terms of the historical norms, what we usually see when retail really starts FOMOing in, we're still very low, which indicates that retail really, for the most part, has not entered the space yet, which further indicates that most likely we have not seen the true cycle peak yet. Because when we do, these numbers are just moonshotting to the upside, and retail is just aping in like nobody's business. So we're not seeing that right now. So very similar thing with Bitcoin. Bitcoin's pulling back. Retail's losing a little bit of interest. Not really surprising. Once again, nowhere near these highs, indicating that retail, for the most part, has not come into crypto. So fear and greed index, we're currently sitting at a 71, so much less extreme in terms of greed than we were last month and even last week. But I would argue that this thing could probably even come all the way back to fair value, so about the 50 area before we see another big move up. In terms of this max time frame here, you guys can see that we got pretty high up there. So if there is a pullback that is coming, like a deeper pullback, like 20, 30-ish% on Bitcoin and the altcoins, obviously maybe a little bit more than 20 or 30%, we'll have to wait and see. Wouldn't surprise me because this was starting to look a little overbought. As you guys can see, pretty much every single time that we hit these massive peaks here, it was the indicative of some kind of swing high, major swing high, I should say. So wouldn't be surprised with a pullback based on this metric. MVRV still looking very cheap. We're obviously not in the perfect buy zone here, but we're not in the perfect sell zone either. So that indicates to me that this crypto, according to this metric, is still undervalued. If we were seriously overbought, we'd be way up here somewhere. As you guys can see, this thing has marked almost every single peak perfectly, with the exception of the November peak. But again, this was a lower high. So this peak here was still actually higher than where we're at right now. So by this metric alone, I would say we're definitely not yet at the cycle peak, most likely, because as I said, this timed every peak pretty much probably almost to the exact week. So according to this Bitcoin rainbow chart, we're still undervalued. It's basically in the buy zone. So a little pullback here. We went from accumulate to buy. So that indicates that Bitcoin is actually cheaper to buy now, which it is. It topped out at about 74,000. Bitcoin currently, as you guys can see over here, is 66,000 or thereabouts. And our average cost on Bitcoin is about 64,500. So we are actually still in the money. If it goes much lower, we might just buy some more. So the last time that we peaked out on this thing, we were in the kind of the orange shades. So if we peak out or top out, I should say, let's just say the cycle remains true and it's the same as it was last time when we top out somewhere towards the end of 2025. If it gets to the orange zone, you could be looking at 387,000 on Bitcoin. If it gets to the yellow zone, you could be looking at still about 280,000. So I would say both of those are probably realistic targets, especially with the spot Bitcoin ETFs being approved. So Nupal, this one does look a little overextended. It's getting pretty close to that euphoria and greed, but we're not there yet. if Bitcoin is going to have a larger size correction, I would say this is probably like some kind of mid-cycle or early cycle pullback, which indicates to me we could either have a double peak cycle or we could even potentially have a triple peak cycle, where the first peak that we saw now just happened at 74K. Then we have some kind of large pullback like in 2021, which we'll go over in the charts. And then we have another major, larger peak after that. This has actually happened twice in Bitcoin's history, just so you all know. Or the triple peak scenario, which we've never seen. But so slightly undervalued on this, not cheap, but definitely not extremely expensive. So we did tell you guys we were going to talk about this. So this is pretty much how the Bitcoin Pi cycle top indicator works. Okay. So it is a mix of two different moving averages. This is the 111-day simple moving average, not EMA. It's the SMA. Okay. And 350-day simple moving average. I'm not sure if that's times 2 or what's going on there, but it's the 350-day simple moving average. And this is based, I believe, on the weekly. In a later video, we'll go ahead and talk about this another time. So DMA I'm pretty sure that indicates the daily moving average, so on the day time frame. But in a later video, we'll actually show you guys this on the chart so you can see for yourself how this works. So pretty much every single time Bitcoin's had a peak, the green line, which is the smaller moving average, has moved above the red line, or the yellow line, I should say. So let me see if I'm getting this right. So my bad. So anytime the yellow line has ever crossed the green line, that has indicated a Bitcoin Pi cycle top. You can see it pretty much throughout all this chart. So here, didn't get one here. That was kind of a fake out. We got one here in May. As you guys can see, it dumped after that, but then we had another peak. So even though this thing did cross, we did actually have another run up. So that is something to keep in mind. I actually did not mean to do that. So let me refresh the page real quick. So something else I want to point out to you guys is, I don't know if you noticed this, but we have hit the green line here. So there is a possibility of a pullback. That yellow MA is sitting roughly about 51,000. So keep that in mind. When we did touch this in 2017, we kind of bounced off of it a few times. We eventually broke it and rode above it until these two lines crossed. Okay. So that is a potential scenario that could play out. Just keep that in mind. Oh, and one other thing. So these two lines have not yet touched or crossed, which also indicates that there is a likelihood we may still not be at the top. Okay. Very unlikely that we're at the top, in my opinion. So now we'll talk about Bitcoin. So we'll start out on the largest time frame. There is actually a new indicator I want to show you guys. So these white lines here are all the halving events. As you guys can see, price went up after the halving. Zoom out here a little bit. You guys can see this one too. Price went up after the halving. So it should be pretty obvious by that metric that we are not yet at the cycle peak, although a pullback is possible. So I'm actually going to get rid of this 51 EMA, and we're going to take a look at the if I can type this in right, stochastic RSI. There we go. Okay, so the stochastic RSI is down here at the bottom below the RSI, as you guys can see. So the thing I want to point out here, the big deal that matters, is anytime that these two have ever crossed bearish, as you guys can see here and right here, it has indicated a cycle peak. However, I do want to point something else out. So this is not a perfect indicator. Okay, it's not 100% accurate. So there was quite a few times this thing crossed before the 2017 peak, indicating that all of these times were just fake outs. And also this one here was just a local peak. That was that was before 2020, the pre-halving year. So that was not actually a true cycle peak. And then we did have a true cycle peak according to this indicator in May of 2021. Or thereabouts, March of 2021. But we did also have a higher peak in November, and the RSI was way down here. So keep that in mind. Now, no death crosses on the indicators. The trend line is still being respected. And as for the monthly time frame, we did have a green candle close above this box and above these previous candle highs. So that's all very bullish. Now on the weekly time frame, I actually want to let me see if I can find this. So I want to get rid of this and get the EMAs back up here. Okay, so here we go. So on the weekly time frame, the lowest EMA sits at 41,000. Blue EMA sits at 52,000, which lines up with that 51,000 we talked about before, which is also kind of where this flag is. And the yellow EMA is at 63,000. We are in a cup and handle pattern right now, according to this handle right here. But the thing I want to point out to you guys is even though everything on this chart looks very bullish, we do have a couple warning signs here. So this RSI has had a death cross. It's not confirmed yet until the week closes. So as of right now, it does appear to be a death cross. So that's a little bit concerning, which indicates there could be either a small or a little bit larger pullback coming. And also this red candle, if we get a close below these candle bodies here, this thing could push down to 61,000. It could bottom there and then bounce or just chop around sideways until after the halving sometime. There is also a possibility that it could pull back to 59,000. Now, if we get a weekly close of any kind below 59,000, that would be concerning. Okay. Would it be the end of the bull run? In my opinion, not really. Okay. I don't think so because again, we are before the halving. So if it were to drop below that, the next level would be again 52 to about 51,000, which if we look at the pi cycle top indicator, one more time, the yellow SMA as of right now sits at roughly about 51,000. So that's where Bitcoin stands currently. And the inverse is also true. If we see a green candle close above this one, then obviously we know that Bitcoin is probably going to head up to 80,000. So with that being said, let's get into the miners. So the miners, here we go. All right, so we're going to start with Clean Spark. We actually weren't going to cover this previously, but we decided we are. So we got an options trade, cash secure put way up here. That was obviously a mistake. We thought it was going to be a breakout, and it wasn't. It happens. You know, of all the trades, swing trades we've ever taken, we've been profitable like 90% of the time, almost immediately. Okay, there's been like a few hangers that we've had to wait on for a while to recover. Not a big deal. It does happen from time to time. So anyways, current support is between $12 on this one to about $14. Current resistance is $21.30 to $23.80. If you manage to find this down in the support zone, which lines up perfectly with the EMAs and those previous candle bodies on the left there, if you can see that, it'd be about 60 to about 79% move. Mara, we are currently in the support zone, roughly. So that's between $18 and $20. The resistance is $29 to $33, and the peak up there at that wick is $34. So if you got in now, which I would say is an ideal time to get in, not financial advice, you'd be looking at roughly about 50 to 71%. And then if we measure from roughly where the price action is now all the way to the top of this is about 79%. So do keep in mind there's a death cross here, which means it could go lower, but there is a lot of support here. The EMAs, the zone, and the previous candle tops here. So Riot, this one is also still looking very bullish. It is kind of pretty close to that support zone. Indicators down here are not really saying much. So the support is between 850 to about 10.15 per share. Resistance 18.70 to $21 a share. In my opinion, this is a buy. I would definitely buy this right now if this is what we were focused on buying. The only concerning part is the fact that this trend line might get broken this week. We'll just have to keep a lookout on that. It is not yet confirmed, but if you were to go ahead and get in now, you'd be looking at about 82% to 105% up to the peak. If you wanted to wait and say, well, I want to get in closer to these candle lows down here, that's fine. You'd be looking at about 111% to about 133% on that move. So HUD8, this is one we are actually picking up right now because, again, it still has the possibility to break out above this trend line. which if we actually draw this even more in here, you guys can see it actually kind of does look like a falling wedge, which again is bullish. The target for the top of the wedge would be basically the top of the wedge. It's $23. So it's pretty close to support. Support's between 350 to about 880. Resistance 1730 to about 2260. Personally, I don't think it's going to go below these lows down here at 6.25. I think that's probably where the low is for this cycle. That's just my opinion, of course. So it's still sitting on the EMAs. That's also bullish. So if you got in now, you'd be looking at about 84 to potentially 138%. If you wanted to get in a little bit lower at these lows down here, about $6, you'd be looking at 163 to about 243%. So BTBT, this one is still just kind of chopping around, not really going up, not really going down. So that's kind of not really surprising. I mean, it is a smaller cap Bitcoin miner, and we haven't had the halving yet. So support $1.60 to $2, resistance 420 to about 480. The peak up here at that wick is about 530 per share. If you wanted to get in now, which I would say is it's relatively cheap compared to the resistance zone to the most recent peak, about 75% to 101%, and all the way up to that wick high there, it'd be about 119% move. So if you wanted to wait to get into support somewhere around these candle lows here at about $2, you'd be looking at anything from 111 up to 159%. Cypher, this one is, in my opinion, the most expensive of the miners, with the exception of CleanSpark. I would say Mara, Riot, Hut 8, BTBT are all very cheap right now and good buys, in my opinion. Not financial advice, just my opinion. With BTBT, Hut 8, sorry, hold on a sec. So with Hut 8, Riot, and Mara being the cheapest, I should say, and BTBT kind of sort of. So Cypher is closer to resistance than support. Me personally, I'd be waiting to buy this one. If it does end up pulling back, I'd be looking to get somewhere in the zone or the EMAs. So the zone is support zone about 215 to 270. Resistance is about 490 up to 550, and that wick high is about 575 a share. So if it pulls back into support, could be anything from 38 to 52% pullback, so pretty steep pullback there. I don't think it's going to go lower than these candles unless we have some kind of freak accident in the markets, like a black swan event or something. So if you got in roughly around these EMAs, it'd be about 46 to 65%. And if you got in around these candle lows, you'd be looking at 105%, 133%, and 142% respectively. So BITF, this one is actually finally in the buy zone. It took a while to get down there, but it is there. So the death cross on the MACD indicates maybe it could go a little bit lower, but is it going to go below these lows? I doubt it. You have resistance here, turn support, and then you also have the EMAs in the support zone here. So the support zone is between $2 to about $2.30 per share. Resistance is $3 to $3.60 per share, and the wick high is $3.90 per share. So if you decided to get in now, you'd be looking at about 35 to 65, and potentially all the way up to 78%. So we're not going to cover Coinbase or MSTR in this video. That's going to be a completely separate video since there's so many yield max ETFs out there and underlines at this point. We'll just cover that in a completely separate video. Usually we would do the crypto related ones, but we're already covering so much in this video that we're just not going to do that this time. So in terms of the options plays, here's what's going on. So we kind of goofed. It is what it is. We're going to take the shares. We decided that we're going to let the contract expire on CLSK and just take the shares, and we'll figure out a way to remedy it. So it expires this Friday. Strike price $23.50 on the put, which means we'll have to buy the shares at $23.50. The current price is $16.50, so we'd be down about $7 a share. Now, in terms of how much that is in an unrealized or a paper loss, so to speak, it's not a realized loss, so it'd be $700 times, because, it's $7 times sorry, not 700. So $7 times 300 shares. So $7 per share times 300 shares. We'd be down about $2,100. But again, keep in mind, we did also get these options premiums, so about $650. So the actual real true numbers is only about $1,450. So that puts our cost basis roughly about $21. I would say pretty much what we're going to do here is we're just going to hold it till it gets back to 21. We might even add to it, and then we'll write a covered call. As soon as it gets back up to around 21, $22, we're going to start writing covered calls on this. HUD 8 was closer to support, so this one's not as bad looking. So 1150 put, we're also going to take this one. We're going to accept the shares, I should say. We're not going to close early or roll any of that because we're just not interested in losing money. Let's just put it like that, because it's expensive at this point to close the contract because the underlying prices have gone down. So 1150 put, so we'd be down roughly about $2 or so a share. Not a big deal. We're actually buying HUD 8 straight off the market as we speak. So we also got a $105 in premiums. So the actual cost basis would be about $10.45 a share. So we're actually not down that much, roughly about 80 cents, or basically equivalent to $80 once we take the shares from HUD 8. Still have the call on BTBT. Not a big deal. We'll deal with that in time. So as you guys can see here, we picked up almost 15 shares this morning of HUD 8 as a way to take advantage ahead of the expiry date we're about to have. So there's a few different ways that we could go about this CLSK. We could roll it, which would cost us money to roll because, again, it's down so much that the premium would not cover the cost to roll. We could close it, which would then cost us $810 times 3 contracts. That's $2,400. We're not going to do that because that's really expensive. It'd be easier just to take the shares and wait for the price to recover. Or another option that we could do is we could just simply accept the shares, do nothing, and wait for the price to recover like we did with Soundhound and an ALT. That played out well with those. Pretty much every time we've been in that position, we have eventually made our money back. There was a couple times when we sold out of Beto and Compound when we lost money, and if we had just waited a little bit longer, like another week or a month or something like that, the price went up and we would have made money. So lesson learned on that. So that's the third option. Fourth option is we could simply add to the shares and bring down the cost basis, which is something we may end up doing. We'll just have to wait and see. I mean, CleanSpark is looking pretty cheap at this point. I mean, it really almost makes sense just to keep buying more with the anticipated move up. So those are all options that we have considered with this cash secured put. We're not really too worried about the recovery because, again, the halving's coming up. The true cycle peak, according to a lot of the indicators, has not come yet. And generally speaking, the top for Bitcoin happens roughly around sometime between the end of this year to about the first quarter of next year. So we're a long, long ways away from that. We're about a year away, so plenty of time to accumulate and recover. Not a big deal. Now, in terms of what our plans are for crypto, this is the last thing we were going to talk about. So we're in the halving month. Pretty much what we're going to do is we're going to put about 80% of our discretionary income into crypto and the other 20% or so into dividend paying stocks. So there's a reason why we're going to do this, okay? So the vast majority of what we've already positioned into, we're going to hold with the intention to sell near the peak of whatever these positions are. And what we're going to start out doing is we're going to accumulate shares of these Bitcoin miners with the intention to run the wheel strategy, or if we can just do cash secured puts, covered calls, and not the wheel, then that's fine too, with the intention of producing more income every single month, which is going to cover the amount that we're not putting into dividend paying stocks, if that makes any sense. Once we get to a certain level of comfortability on that, where we say, okay, we have more than enough Bitcoin miners at this point, let's go buy something else. Okay, we've produced enough income. We have more income to put into dividend paying stocks and crypto. Assuming the prices are right, we'll go buy more native crypto and more of the Grayscale trusts or whatever is cheapest at the time. And then we'll get into a little bit later. We've already touched over this in previous videos, but we'll get more in detail into how we plan to execute selling near the top or as we approach the peaks. So that is kind of the overall game plan as of this month. We intend to go in big into crypto throughout the rest of the year. That's more or less the plan. So that is subject to change. It depends on what the market conditions are. We'll have to keep an eye out on that. But as of right now, that is the plan. So, anyways, this is Bitcoin and the Bitcoin miners. Hope you all enjoyed this content. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see y'all later. Peace.